Tonight, Pandora goes full anime protagonist, and I gotta say, it's pretty fun. Animal Man learns to hate Twitter just as much as the rest of us, and Justice League Dark finally decides to make some progress on the nothing that is Trinity War. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 103 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and it's a pretty standard week. So instead of talking about things going on this week, I instead want to jump to next week real quick. Next week is our anniversary episode. Episode 104 will be 2 years of me doing this show. And you might say to yourself, 104, that's such a random number. Why didn't you just do 100? Well, first of all, shut up. It's my show. I'll do what I want. But secondly, 104 is 52 plus 52. It is exactly 2 years later. 100 would just be dishonest, and it would be that much harder to do it in episode 3, anniversary 3 or 4 or 5. I don't think we actually get to 5, do we? No, it's 4.5 years. So yeah, I'm doing this because it makes sense. Episode 104 will be the anniversary episode. Now, mind you, last anniversary, I actually only had like 7 comics to talk about, so I was actually able to do something with it. I have too many comics next week, and you'll see that at the end of the episode, but I'm probably not going to do anything. But I will change my shirt for those of you who have been watching this show, because trust me, it reeks. And also the color of the title card will change, which for audio listeners, I got nothing for you. Same as it ever was. Additionally, tiny little thing that's happening. Within the next few weeks, I'm not sure exactly when, we have decided that on the official Comics from the Multiverse YouTube channel, we will be cutting this show up into its individual comic segments and releasing them separately. I will be starting with episode 1 and moving forward from there. So if you're interested in keeping up on any specific comic or just want to see it cut up, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Link is in the description. But yeah, that is going to be happening eventually, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, that's enough about next week. Let's talk about this week. This week we have comics, and I will tell you the comics coming out. We have Batman and Robin, Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Superman Unchained, Green Lantern New Guardians, Justice League of America's Vibe, Wonder Woman, Legion of Superheroes, Animal Man, Justice League Dark, and Trinity of Sin, Pandora. Out of that, the major things you need to pay attention to are our first 2 comics we'll be covering, Justice League Dark and Trinity of Sin, Pandora. The next part and the tie-in to Trinity War, respectively. Additionally, we have in the Legion of Superheroes book, that is the final issue of that. I'll tell you, it definitely doesn't get better, but it might not get worse. And also, Green Lantern New Guardians is the last issue before we get technically into an event called Lights Out. So that's a thing. If you're interested at all, it's got some lead in there, so be sure to check that out. Anyway, I've rambled enough. Let's go ahead and jump right on into the comic reviews with Justice League Dark. Justice League Dark number 23, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Mikel, Janin. So this is the next part of Trinity War. I believe the penultimate part. Last time, a whole bunch of stuff happened. Argus was blown up while Superman and Co. was in it, and Wonder Woman got her hands on Pandora's box. That's kind of the big things. So this issue opens up with Madame Xanadu, and she's just sitting alone in a chair, and she's like, I don't understand why I'm important to this story. I'm kind of not Superman, Wonder Woman, or Batman, so I don't know what's going on here. But then I realize, oh, right, it's because I can see the future. And she sees all these things that supposedly are going on right now. They see, yes, there was the explosion with Superman inside. Phantom Stranger died, quote unquote, near Batman stuff. There was a Constantine tie-in, which actually does matter. And she realizes, all right, but none of that's what matters because I see that the final battle is just now beginning. And we cut to Wonder Woman with the box. And just Everyone's trying to get it away from her. She's beating the crap out of Frankenstein, Aquaman, Hawkman, Black Orchid, Stargirl. All of them are just bumping in and trying to get their hands on her. And they're just like, okay, she has the powers of a god, and she is super evil. So what in the hell are we supposed to do here? And then all of a sudden there's a bolt of lightning in the room, and Shazam shows up. And one of them's like, Shazam, what are you doing? You just left right in the middle of things. He's like, yeah, no, I got dragged into a tie-in that I definitely shouldn't have been in. But regardless, that box is making you evil. I'm going to take it from you. So he goes in, he punches her, and he grabs the box. And of course, as soon as he touches the box, he turns evil. But when he turns evil, his costume changes to that of Black Adam. He's now entirely black and yellow. And every being that is attached to magic is able to feel it. All of them get really like hurt and not feeling good, including, strangely enough, Dr. Fate on Earth 2. He feels it as well. So one of the big ones who feels it is Deadman. And Deadman, Batman's standing there. He's like, Deadman, what's up? You cool? And he's like, yeah, no, I saw like every magical person, even some I didn't recognize. They were all in pain, and I saw them all. It's something bad has really happened. I think Shazam's at the middle of it. And Batman's like, hold the phone. You said you saw everyone? And he's like, yeah. Oh, right, Madame Xanadu. That's kind of the whole thing with might be. So he believes that they can track down Madame Xanadu now. Meanwhile, back at Argus, everyone digs themselves out of the rubble. Turns out that Element Woman made a shell of hard metals that protected them from the explosion. Amanda Waller's also safe. And they just are calling her out. They're like, okay, first off, you made the Justice League of America to go against the Justice League. And she's like, yeah, no, that's totally a thing I did. But like, you guys are out of your minds if you don't think that that was like a thing that had to happen. And also, not important right now. We clearly are dealing with something else. Argus just exploded. And at this point, Firestorm's like, guys, Waller made me make kryptonite, and she's not nice. And so at that point, everyone's like, oh, for God's sake. Yes, fine, I made him make kryptonite, but like, Superman killed a dude. Forgive me for being a bit worried about that. So at that point, Superman points out, hey guys, a building just blew up, and there's probably survivors in the rubble. Maybe we should deal with that. And everyone goes off to do that, except for Green Arrow, who's holding Waller at arrow point. So back in Lex Luthor's cell, because if you remember, that's where the whole Pandora's box trade-off thing is happening. Everyone's going after Shazam, trying to attack him, but also trying to just get the box for themselves. We see Frankenstein gets a hold of it. We see that Stargirl starts to feel a bit weird, and Pandora's like, yeah, no, this is the box. Like, even if you're not holding it, just being exposed to it long enough makes you a dick. And so Zatanna puts out a spell that protects herself and Stargirl, and I believe Pandora, but at least Stargirl, from the effects of the box. And then she uses a spell to just blow everyone away. Everyone's gone. So she goes to pick it up, but as she does so, of course, everyone is still feeling the effects of the box, so they start attacking her, and, you know, it doesn't go well. Eventually, she loses the box because Wonder Woman punches her in the face, and as it looks like Wonder Woman's going for it, someone else steps up and grabs it. And it turns out it's Constantine, and he just picks it up, no problem. He's super chill. And Zatanna's like, why aren't you infected with evil? And he's like, I'm already a dick. You can't make me more of a dick. So at that point, he says, let's teleport out of here. Teleports away. And it is worth noting, in the Constantine tie-in, he straight up, like, died. So I'm thinking this isn't Constantine, but we'll see. Anyway, they arrive at some Greek ruins, and he's like, I have no idea why we're here. I think my ability may have mixed this all up. But they feel a magical presence. They go down into the ground beneath them, and there's Madame Xanadu, strapped to a chair. And she's just mumbling something like, oh, it's not a prison. It's not a prison. You have to understand. At that point, Batman and all of his team show up, and they're like, hey, Xanadu, Zatanna, how did you get here before us? And she's like, long story. She's saying something, though. And she says, Pandora was wrong. You're all wrong. It's not a prison. It's a doorway. And then showing up next to them is the outsider, who says, yep, you're right. And now I'm going to open it. So next issue, I forget what that is. I think it's just normal Justice League. Yeah, they're gonna wrap it up. He's gonna open the box. So I think this was a much better issue than it has been. I feel like this is finally the first time where I feel like there's real forward momentum. Not in that it feels like any of the characters are doing anything of consequence. It just feels like finally we're getting to the point where we're having to move things forward to get to the end. We are revealing what Pandora's box truly is. It is not a box. It is a doorway to some other place. Like, fine, good, get there. I stand by what I said in the Justice League of America last time. This feels like it is not an event on its own. It feels like an event that is strictly a prelude to the larger event, which is, of course, Forever Evil coming up. So, do I think that it is good in that regard? It's a fine issue. It's just the event overhaul is giving me a level of fatigue because it's just a whole lot of spinning wheels. So the art in this is fine. I like the way it's written. The twists are all right. It's just not doing anything for an extended period of time. So I'm going to give this one a flat 7. That is taking all of that into account. Otherwise, if it was actually doing something, I'd probably be giving this one like an 8 or an 8.5. But 7 is as high as I can go with it not actually doing anything. Trinity of Sin, Pandora, number 3, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Daniel Sampere. This is, of course, another tie-in to Trinity War, and this one actually takes place dead center in the middle of Justice League Dark number 23. So, first and foremost, we open up in Mount Song in like the 1300s, and Pandora is being trained by some sage guy, and this is like just how the whole issue goes, is that it's her past where she's being trained by some sage person, and they speculate on what is evil. So she's talking to this guy, and he's just like, evil is just what happens when you disturb the natural order. If you push something out of line, evil is the correction that is that. The world in natural is good. And Pandora's like, no, I literally released evil out into the world, so it's not that. And he's like, I mean, you're asking me my opinion here. And she's asking for him to teach her how to basically, quote unquote, kill this evil. But he's like, there's nothing to kill. It's like the seasons changing or trying to punch a flood. Like, you can't do it. It's impossible. So we see what's going on now is everyone in Lex Luthor's cell is fighting over Pandora's box, as was in Justice League Dark. But hovering above them seems to be ghostly apparitions of the 7 deadly sins. And Pandora's like, I can see them. They're there. They're just bathing in this chaos. But like, how do I fight them? And we see all of the different sins are like chiming in saying like, oh man, these superheroes, they're super chaotic and we love it. Feel their pride, feel their envy over the box. Like, all of this is so good for us. And we are going to continue to conquer this world in your name, mother. And she's like, no. So then we cut to almost 1600 where she's training with, I'm going to call him Robin Hood. She calls him Adalger. I'm sure that's like an actual historical figure. He's Robin Hood. So training with him, and he's like, well, you know, there was a man named Aquinas who said that evil might be something that's required for a perfect universe to exist. And she's like, no, I literally released them out of a box. That's not the case. And he's like, all right, well, you didn't come to me for like ethics. You came to me to learn how to stop arrows with your hands. So get ready to catch. So we see once again in the cell, Wrath is charging them all up. He's like bathing on their anger and whatnot. Pandora pulls her guns and he's like, Mom, you know you can't shoot me even with your mystical magical weapons. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And all the other sins are like, just give up. Let us do our thing. You don't got to worry about a thing. Mom, this is all for you. And she's like, no, please. So once again, she freaks out. Then we cut back to 1700s, where she's meeting with an old woman in the woods, and apparently she's basically asking her, like, hey, I want to get more specific here. Instead of saying, how do I destroy evil, I want to know specifically, how do I destroy spirits or like bodiless entities? And the woman's like, here, take this bowl. You see that liquid inside? It's not liquid. It's a spirit. I can do that. I can make you do that. But she goes through this whole long metaphor that basically ends up on with, you can see yourself in the spirit's reflection. That's how you can impact it, is when you can see yourself in it. And she's like, that doesn't make any sense. But they continue their lessons. Then we cut away to Baltimore. The guy, Marcus, I believe his name is, the guy who made weapons for Pandora. The FBI agents, sorry, not FBI, Shade and Argus agents, I'm probably going to call them FBI agents again, show up and they're like, hey, Marcus, here's the thing. We know that you make weapons and like your door's not even locked to your little space here. So clearly you think you've got some powerful friends. Have you seen this woman? And they hold up a picture of Pandora. He's like, I'm not going to talk to you. And I really have no reason why. And they're like, okay, well, we have this video of Pandora shooting at a bunch of superheroes. She is like grade A supervillain. And those are definitely your weapons in there. So either you're going to talk or we're going to have to bring you in. What's it going to be? And I want to make clear, the question that they're asking him is, where is Pandora? Meanwhile, they have a video of Pandora, like a live feed. So what's the real question? Like, clearly they know where she is. Regardless, we go back into Lex Luthor's cell. Everyone's still beating the crap out of each other. And as she stares at the box and all the people fighting each other, she does like, the best way I can describe it is that scene in an anime where like the main character flashes through a bunch of like lessons that he learned and like all of a sudden it clicks and like the heroic music starts. She literally starts sparking with energy. Like it's so cliched, but regardless, she's like, I get it now. I understand. I have to see myself in them. And she runs up to him, and all the sins are like, oh no, something has changed. She's different now. What's going on? And we see her flashing back to what all of her mentors said. And she says, you know what? I am envious. I'm envious of them because they do so much. They've lived these lives that I could never live because of you. I feel true envy of them. And she runs up to Envy and shoots him in the head. And Envy goes down. Everyone's like, oh my, is Envy dead? Envy's dead. How are you doing that, Mom? And she just stands there in the smoke and energy. She's like, oh yeah, who's next? So I mean, after this, it's not a tie-in anymore to Trinity War, so I don't know if we're going to pick up immediately after or if it's going to be a thing of like, yeah, you know, she just didn't kill the rest of the sins right then for some reason, but I'm sure we'll get to it. I gotta say, this at least gives Pandora something to do. For this entire, I mean, it's only been 2 issues so far, but for the 2 issues, it just felt like she was the bearer of the MacGuffin. It didn't really feel like she herself had anything to do. So now that we've introduced this idea of, no, she has this anime protagonist power where she alone is able to take this on, I'm down with it. I think that it is a good enough plot to go with. Mind you, I don't know how it makes any sense, considering the idea of there clearly still has to be evil once the sins are gone. So she can't, like, what we're basically saying here is that either her mission means nothing or no character in the DC universe can ever feel envy again. So it's one or the other. And frankly, I think it's going to be the former. So overall, I'm going to give this one like I'll give it a 7. But it's a low 7. It's like right bordering on a 6.5 because it is... I just got a kick out of how straight up anime that last few pages were. Like, I could hear the soundtrack playing in my head of like the heroic music starting up. It just made me laugh. So that's alone is getting it the 7 instead of the 6.5. Batman and Robin number 23, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Patrick Gleason. So this is part 5 of the getting over Damian's death thing, which ostensibly should be Acceptance, which it is titled, but I thought that was last issue, which was where he went out with Catwoman. But regardless, we pick up here, and we are shown a flashback to the night Damian died. In Batman Incorporated, it's literally the same scene. Batman is like drowning in a safe in a pool, and Talia's just gloating, saying, I've taken everything from you. Except in this one, Batman drowns. He straight up just dies, and he doesn't get out of the safe. And we see Bruce jolt up awake. He's wearing VR headset, and apparently all this is a simulation that he's been running almost 500 times to see what he could do differently to save Damian. And we see standing in the background watching him run it again and again and again for seemingly 4 days is Alfred and Nightwing. And so he runs it again. He does things ever so slightly different, but once again, he just can't get down to save Damian in time from his cloned twin brother. Though we do see that Batman arrives at least enough to see Damian die this time, and he takes a bomb, blows up Heretic along with himself. And so he wakes up again, and he's like, damn it, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, I gotta keep going. And Nightwing's like, hey man, Alfred called me. I'm currently doing a thing in Chicago, but I'm needed for this book, so what's going on, man? And he's like, oh, Alfred, stop calling in people to try to help me. I'm fine. I'm going to keep on running this until I get it right. And he's like, all right, cool. Is it 2-player? And Alfred's like, dude, you were going to help me talk him out of it. And he's like, yeah, but he's not going to get talked out. He's Batman. When's the last time you talked Batman out of something? So I'm just going to jump in with him and see if we can do it together. So he hops in. Now it's a 2-player simulation. We see both himself and Dick running through it, seemingly doing the same things for the most part. We see everything here is identical up to a certain point where they do manage to get in and save Damian before he is impaled. And then from that point, the fight scene continues. We see them save the young girl who was in the room, Ellie, in a different way. And yeah, more or less the scene ends with the Heretic having a sword aimed at Batman instead, and Nightwing comes in and impales the Heretic against the wall, and he's like, well, we did it. We saved the day. And we see Bruce looking at his, virtual Damien. He's talking to Dick, and he's like, we did everything we could here, but it's still not enough. My son is still dead. And Nightwing's like, yeah, he is, but like, that's okay. And he's like, well, no, he left behind a black hole. Like, there's nothing left. And he's like, no, he didn't. He left behind you, a father who loved him very much, and he left behind all the memories that you have of him. Look, Bruce, regardless of what you think, regardless of how unfair you think all of this was, Damian knew what he was joining into, probably better than literally any of us, including you, because he was born for this. He was a soldier from birth. He understood what the job meant. Like, he went out every night and he knew what he was getting into. And Bruce like sighs and he's like, I can live with his death, but I'm never going to accept it. And Nightwing's like, you don't have to. You're a father who buried your son. That is completely understandable. So at that point, they go off, and we see later on Alfred is standing over the computer and he plugs in some data. And he runs the next simulation. But instead of it being the simulation of during the battle, it's shortly beforehand where Alfred is told to keep Damian inside the cave, and Damian leaves. So we see him telling Alfred, like, oh, I'm going out there, I'm saving my father. And Alfred gives him his suit and says, like, oh, I'll tell him you overpowered me. And he's like, no need, I already have the access code memorized and all that. And he breaks his way out. And as he makes his way to the armory to grab a suit, he says, there's actually no way you could stop me. And so Alfred walks up to him, puts his hand on his shoulder and says, your father would be very proud. Turns out, though, inside his hand, he hid a tiny little tranquilizer that knocks Damian out, and he is unable to leave. And Alfred picks him up, and he says, like, oh, you'll be awake in like 12 hours, but you're not leaving this cave. I made a promise to your father. So he picks Damian up, lays him down in the back cave, like on a chair, and he says, I want you to know how proud I am of you, Damian, and how I'll never forgive myself for letting you leave the cave that night. And so back in the real world, Bruce is standing over Alfred. He's watching the screen, seeing how horrible Alfred feels for letting this happen. Finally, Alfred comes out of the simulation. He's crying and sobbing, saying that he's sorry. And Bruce is like, no, dude, I'm the sorry one. I didn't have the wherewithal to realize that I'm not the only one who lost a son tonight. And Alfred's like, can we please just not do this? Like, to have this machine or anything? And Bruce says, yeah, no problem. He turns it off, and they both leave. It's a sad issue, man. It's a very sad issue, but it's good. It is. I like the idea that, you know, he had to go through all that stuff. He had to work out his anger. He had to go back out and, like, do something good and save, like, a young child and stuff like that in order to get to this point. Like, we couldn't open up on this issue after Damian died and him just being like, yeah, I guess I'm good now that I saved him virtually. It's just the process he had to go through. That being said, viewing this as an entire arc, I do think that while this is an incredibly strong issue, it is kind of weakened by the fact of the previous issues either not feeling like they fit into the stages of grief at all. For instance, the Batgirl issue, as it just seemed like more rage to me. And then the last issue with Catwoman, I think actually was a better capper than this one. I think this is the depression issue, and the Catwoman one is the acceptance one. The problem being is that it doesn't give that same punch with Alfred. And I think that punch with Alfred is really what makes this issue a great issue. So I'm going to give this one, and I'm going to give it a solid 8. I'm debating 8.5, but I do think that a little too much of it is just exactly the same recap from that issue of Batman Incorporated. I don't think that it really does enough on its own to push it up to that 8.5, but still a very solid issue writing-wise. Batwoman number 23, written by J. Williams III and W. Haden Blackman, art by Trevor McCarthy. So last issue, we basically just had this whole rundown of them getting information on Batman and how they could possibly take him down. Meanwhile, Bats, aka I think it's Flamebird, it could be Firebird, I can't recall exactly, is talking about breaking into the DEO. So this issue picks up with Maggie just kind of chastising Kate because she's just sitting there. She's not doing anything. And Maggie's like, we got one day before we need to do this. You need to be like training with your gear or literally anything. Just why are you sitting here? This is the most dangerous thing you've like ever done. And Kate's like, I'm ready. I've been ready for days. Like, I'm not going to get any more prepared than before. And Maggie basically says like, sorry, I didn't, you know, the only frame of reference I have for Batwoman is the night that she drugged me on a boat with fear toxin. And Kate is like, okay, you know what? I feel bad about that. I really did not want to do it, but I understand how you have issues trusting me with that when that's the only way that you've seen me do it. So to make it up for you, and she pulls out a thing of fear toxin, I'm gonna do this. And she injects herself. And Maggie's like, what are you doing, you idiot? And so she starts falling asleep deep into fear toxin. So then we cut to, I'm gonna go with Flamebird, her stuff in that she basically jumps a guy from the DEO, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but we will get to it. The analyst guy who joined in on the team. And they jump him, and Flamebird has to tell herself, like, this guy doesn't have a gun, and I know that we are actually about to torture him for information, but, like, I have to put that down, my conscience aside, because he represents the evil of the DEO, who has taken, you know, my cousin? I think it's cousin, away from the family. So, got to do that. So they black bag him and take him to an unknown location. Meanwhile, we see the nightmares of Kate. They're very ethereal. They don't really follow a plot. They do have a tiny little thing in here of Batman coming out of Bones' mouth. And then we see Kate's father in the grip of Beth. And she's choking him out, clawing off his face. And we see once she claws off his face, it is just Bones' skull underneath, like the black skull. So in the real world, we see she's curled up in bed with Maggie watching over her as she's going through her trip. So meanwhile, back at the black bag interrogation, he's being tortured. He's basically being asked for, information as to where Beth is being held exactly. And he's like, you guys know I've been trained to resist torture. I'm not going to give up any information. And Beth's trying to be like, yeah, no, guys, this is the wrong way to do this. And Colonel Kane's just like, no, trust us. I know you've got squeamish, but like, we got to do this. So they keep on torturing him. And finally, Beth steps up like, no, you're doing this wrong. Let me take this. Let me just jump in. I guarantee you it's going to go better. So we see Maggie still continuing to care for Kate. We see one of her nightmares is Maggie dead, and that really gets to Kate. That bothers her. So Maggie cuddles up behind Kate in bed. So then we get Beth's idea of interrogation, and she just comes up and plays good cop. She's like, hey, you want a water? You look like you're thirsty. And he's like, I know about good cop, bad cop. You're still not going to get any info out of me. And she's like, no, I'm not good cop. I'm genuinely offering you if you want water. Because here's the thing. I know you're not afraid of us. I get that. I know you can resist torture. But I also know about you. I've read your file. I've done my research. They say in the name here. I'm just trying to remember what it is. Doesn't matter. So when they have him entirely figured out, what Bet basically gets at is that this guy came from nothing. And he was a hard worker. He got these multiple PhDs and stuff like that. And he got up to the point he got to through nothing but hard work and determination and wanting to get to that higher point. And she theorizes like, oh, maybe it's because your dad was too hard on you. Maybe it's because of, I don't know, someone made fun of you in school. Doesn't matter. Regardless, you've gotten as high as you can possibly get within the DEO. Now, if Bones were to be out of the picture, which he would have to be if it came to light that he resurrected a known terrorist and then she escaped, well, he would be polishing off his resume and you might be in the running for his job. Sound interesting to you? And so after a brief pause, he's like, okay, give me something with GPS. I'll show you where she is. And he's like, great, here's my phone. So at that point, we see, why am I blanking on her name? Chase. Chase has started what is called Operation Batfrack, which is basically, we got to bring Batman out in the open. And to do so, we have collected a bunch of villains. So we see Bane, Poison Ivy, Riddler, Mad Hatter, and a fifth guy, who I think is Tweedledee or Tweedledum, but definitely not iconic enough. And basically, he says, yeah, all right, you guys go out in the town, you guys mess with stuff, no killing anyone, or I swear to God, we will put you in a hole so deep you will never climb out. And Bane's like, a hole in the ground, eh? So that's going on. And then we see Kate finally coming out of it. She gets out of her stuff. She turns around, she sees Maggie cuddling behind her. She's like, hey, did you stay here watching over me the whole time? And she's like, yeah, you were not okay, and it was very, very stupid of you to do that. And they kind of bond over what the fear toxin makes you feel, which is that you know at a certain point that it can't be real, but you can't get out of it. You can't shake yourself out of it. And that lack of control, the inability to leave of your own volition is what really drives home the fear. It's what really makes it something awful. And she's like, I'm sorry, if I'd known it was like that, I never would have done it to you. I am so scared that you're just going to leave if I didn't do something like this and whatever. And Maggie lays down the law. She's like, 1, are you ever going to kill someone that wasn't going to kill you? She says, no. 2, are you ever going to cheat on me? No. 3, are you ever going to hurt my kid? No. And she says, all right, I can forgive pretty much anything else. So she says, all right, ask me again. And Kate says, Maggie, will you marry me? And she says, yes, of course. And the final pages here are Bones is watching over as I think it's the Batman villains start causing their chaos. He sees explosions in the city. He lights a cigar and takes a puff as he waits. And we see Kate put on her Batwoman costume, kiss Maggie, and go out the window. To be concluded, next issue. I liked it. I do think that it felt like more of a pacing issue than it did a required one, because it didn't really feel like Kate had anything to do at this point, but they still needed to have how they B-team got their info on where Beth is. So because of that, the whole Kate part felt, I mean, technically it's like, adding characterization and whatnot, but is it really? Like, all the things in her nightmare sequence, I knew. Like, I it didn't add anything. It wasn't anything. Even if you read deeper into it, it's still just like, oh, yeah, she doesn't feel like she's in control, and she sees all these horrible things regarding not only her father, but her sister and Director Bones and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's all been done before. So I could have used a better Kate plot, but I did enjoy the idea that Bet is so good at reading people that she's just able to break this guy down without torturing him and say like, hey, just give me the info and this cool thing might be yours. She's kind of playing the game. I appreciate that. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a 7.5. But I do want to point out how much I really do enjoy the Flamebird plot. It's just that the Kate plot brings it down that little bit. But a 7.5 is still very respectable. Birds of Prey number 23, written by Christy Marx, art by Romano Molenaar and Scott McDaniel. So this is a super quick read. Like, over before I even knew it here. Last issue, we had the entire group was attacked by people who worked for Basilisk, and this nerd came in. And the only thing that makes her nerdy is she has dyed hair and likes anime. But regardless, her whole thing is that she has a way to mind control people and take them out. And it seems, as we'll see in this issue, that's via putting them into a super blissful dream state. So this opens up with the whole Birds of Prey team knocked out and everyone on the bad side standing above them. And they're all just like, I'm going to beat the crap out of them. Let me at them. I'm going to take out Black Canary or Strix or whoever. And the one of them steps forward to be like, guys, our nerd is connected to all of them. Any pain they feel might come back on her. Can't risk that. We got to let him just sleep. But we've got people coming in to pick him up right now. And we see she leans down into Condor's ear because, of course, they used to be lovers. And she's just like, well, dream whatever you need to, darling, but it will never be. And then we just cut between everyone's dreams. So Condor is literally dreaming of being in a romance novel with Black Canary. Just dinner, wine, dancing, massages, a little bit of fun afterwards. And he's super into her. Then we go to Dinah's, Black Canary's, who is over 3 pages. First is when she first came across Pandora's box when she was on Team 7. And Kurt was lost/killed in the rubble, but in her dream he comes to, he's out, and she gives him a hug and he's just like, hey, it's okay, you're strong, you don't need me anymore, goodbye. And then he just fades away and she's like, no, you're the only one who can help me control my powers, I need that. But then Condor shows up and he's like, I want to be your future, baby. And she's like, I'm down for that. So that's happening. We go to Batgirls, which is, she just wants a happy family. Her mom and brother are still in the picture living with her dad. Her brother is in college and is just normal. Her mom is doing the dishes. The brother's like, hey, sis, I heard that you had some important news. And she's like, yeah, everyone, I got into the FBI profiler program. And everyone's like, that's great. And they all give each other a huge hug and say, family's so awesome, isn't it? So at that point, we see the helicopter to pick them up has arrived. They report to Regulus and Basilisk saying, hey, we're going to pick them up. Is there anybody you want specifically? And he's like, yeah, we're here for Canary first and foremost. So grab her specifically. So they start boxing up Condor and Canary first because the pods come in groups of 2. Meanwhile, Uplink, the nerd, is like, guys, I can't keep this. There's something going on with the Talon, with Strix. it's not cool. And then we see what Strix's thing is that she's a young child. She's out having a picnic with her family. They're calling her Mary, of course. And they're just like, oh, you learned the most wonderful hymn in church today. How about you sing it for us? And so she stands up in front of her family and tries to sing, but she's unable to. Her voice just isn't working. And as they say, they're like, oh, honey, what's wrong? You could sing better than that. Do better than that. And they look up in the air and see a bomb descending down upon them, not knowing what it is, though. Meanwhile, Mary seems to know. She tries to call out. Her voice doesn't work, and her whole family explodes and dies. So, as Condor and Canary get hoisted up into the helicopter, Strix manages to snap out of it. The rest of the terrorists realize this, and they're like, okay, kill Batgirl and Strix. That's definitely, like, they're gonna cause problems now. But Strix is just fast enough to pull Batgirl out of the way of being killed. Whole fight scene breaks out, where Strix is basically knocked on her ass by the biggest muscle, and Batgirl's like, okay, well, this guy is going to be hard to beat, but I've got an idea. And so she just thumbs in his eyes. He starts freaking out. He manages to bumble around enough that he loses Batgirl and Strix, and the other terrorist make their escape along with the chopper. So at that point, Strix is like, well, she doesn't say anything, but Batgirl implies, yes, I know, Strix, we have to go get Canary and Condor. I don't know how we'll do it, but we will find a way. So then we go to Canary, who wakes up from her dream. She's in, like a healing pod or whatever, some sort of thing. As soon as she wakes up, she just pounds her way out of it, smashes the glass. She's like, hey, I can feel the fact that my Canary cry isn't working. That's not right. The only person who could dampen my cry like that is... And she looks in the pod next to her, and there is Kurt, still alive, as Regulus is standing behind her. Like, yeah, I did that. So, her old husband and her new flame are both in the same space. Whatever could happen this week on Days of Our Lives. I mean, it's not a bad issue. I do think it was a bit excessive to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the pages be devoted strictly to dream sequence. Like, I understand characterization, but, like, it wasn't anything new. The Batgirl one was easily the most, like, yeah, no, that's just her character. That's how we see her. So, I don't even know why I was there. The other ones, which only appear in this book, I mean, the Strix one is the only one that adds, I think, even the slightest bit of depth. The fact that Condor's is actually just a romance novel, and there's no deeper narrative to that, shows how one note the character is at this point. But I digress. Do I think it's an okay issue? It's fine. It's not great. It feels like this could have been done in half the time, but they didn't have anything else to pad out the rest of it, So I'm going to give this one a 6.5. I also want to point out, I really don't like Regulus / Basilisk as villains, because I feel they're too nebulous and vague and stupid. They're not interesting to me, and this book is not doing anything to drive that home anymore. So yeah, 6.5. Red Hood and the Outlaws, number 23, written by James Tynion IV, art by Julius Gopez and Ian Chruchill. So, last issue, we just had everything coming to a head. Arsenal showed up ready to attack on behalf of the Untitled. Jason's ready to defend the League of Assassins. And Starfire learned the real truth of what's going on behind it all. So, we open up with the Untitled just kind of chilling in the desert outside the League of Assassins place. Like, it's going to work this time. We're going to do it. They've got an amnesiac leading them. They're so stupid. And it's like, yeah, but that's Red Hood. He was handpicked to do this job. And it's like, whatever. We'll still be fine. Because we've got Arsenal. And then we cut to Arsenal. And he's got a bunch of drones flying out as the man-bats start attacking him. They fire off darts, which apparently trigger a hypnotic state that he copied from Mad Hatter. But he doesn't know how to make it so that they can do things just enough that they're all dazed and confused. So he's like, well, that got rid of all that. So I'm happy that it worked. And then Greystone comes up behind him. He's like, dude, who are you talking to? And he's like, I haven't slept for 3 days. I don't even know if I'm awake right now. Forgive me if I'm talking aloud. And Greystone's like, okay, well, regardless, I've got some telekinetic powers or whatever. And we see Arsenal has built a shield so that he is unaffected by it. And he also has in his clothes salt to defend from magic, because he figured, yeah, League of Assassins seems like they would use some level of magic. So he's totally defended from Greystone. He uses a Mr. Freeze gun to shoot him with ice and freeze him. Then we see a sniper tries to take him out from one of the nearby towers. His shields are still up, so no big deal. But then showing up next to him is Cheshire, who still is totally hitting on him constantly. And he's like, hey, I got myself a teleporter, and I managed to figure out via whatever, here's where your shield generator is. So she crushes that in her hand. And he's like, yeah, well, I've got scanning software too. So he looks to find where her teleporter is, short circuits it, and causes her to just teleport randomly, like unable to be stopped. So he's like, all right, well, I only kind of feel bad about that. Anyway, let's go ahead and start the big guns. So he pulls out the big guns, makes his way towards the town. We see the Untitled's like, hey, random dude in our group who doesn't have the same style of speech bubbles that we do, gotta owe it to you. You did good for a regular human. And the guy's like, you underestimate me. I'm not just a regular human. And then all of a sudden, a pillar of fire flies over the sky, and it's like, ah, crap, Starfire's here. Damn it. So we see Arsenal manages to meet up with Red Hood, and I just have to point out at this point, this is only for this one page, because after this he doesn't wear the mask anymore. They did the thing where Red Hood has a mouth, and like it can open and stuff. Never do that. To all future artists, never give Red Hood a mouth. So, anyway, we see him talking to him, and Red Hood's basically saying, like, Roy, dude, I may not remember everything, but I want to be here. I'm choosing to be here. And Roy's like, they are the League of Assassins. They are clearly evil. And you are not the Jason I know. You are just an imposter. Therefore, I don't have to listen to you. I'm going to knock you out and take you back home. And as he goes to attack and knock him out, Starfire jumps in and says, Roy, you don't know what's going on here. And Roy's like, I'm sick of people telling me I don't know what's going on here. I have a pretty good idea. And Starfire tries to start to explain as whatever the hell his name is. I genuinely don't remember. But he's able to increase his density. That's the thing. And he steps up and he's like, hey, I'm here to stop you. And Starfire's like, dude, I'm technically in this situation, I'm on your side. And he's like, I don't care. You're intruders. I'm going to stop you. So Starfire lifts him up into the statue above. And he's like, I'm only 10% of your density. I could reach inside your body and grab your heart and stop it if I wanted to. And she's like, well, why don't you? He's like, well, that wouldn't be fun. Also, I'm going to show just how powerful I am by increasing my density 100-fold. And then Starfire and him just fall to the ground. So with them semi out of the picture, Bronze Tiger and Lady Shiva step up next to Jason, and they're like, hey, let's kick this guy's ass. So Jason, Lady Shiva, and Bronze Tiger beat the crap out of Arsenal, kicking him towards the fountain. Arsenal's like, I still got one trick up my sleeve. He pulls out a little itty-bitty crossbow, shoots it into the fountain, and it explodes. And underneath is a giant Lazarus pit. I know that it's not a Lazarus pit. It's whatever the hell they called it like 4 issues ago. It's a Lazarus pit. So at that point, Shiva steps up like, you idiot, do you know what you just did? And he's like, well, if you don't like it, then I do like it. And all the rest of the people for the League of Assassins step up because they were just mildly inconvenienced. Even Cheshire's back and just like, yeah, screw this guy. Let's just kill him. And also Starfire, because clearly we don't know her allegiance. Kill them both. We got to worry about the war coming on. And Jason's like, hold on. If you want me to be your leader, don't kill them. Put them in jail. And then I'll decide what happens to them. But, like, I will lead you now in this war. And he's just like, dude, our kind of whole thing is killing, so we're going to kill them. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was the leader, and you have to listen to what the leader says. And Shiva's like, he's got a point. So, at that point, Greystone comes up and says, hey, the Untitled are, like, right outside. We got to do something now. And Bron Tiger's like, fine, whatever, as long as you're going to lead us to victory. So Starfire and Arsenal are being brought to jail. Starfire's like, hey, don't chain me up because I would literally rather die. And he's just like, I get that. I understand. But like, this is kind of the only option I have. Sorry about this, crazy fire lady. So then he points out, like, wait a minute, hold on. Well, Starfire says, hey, here's a little thing you need to know about it. They're coming here to destroy this pool because it's the only thing that can strip them of their power. You should probably know that MacGuffin point. And he's like, why are you helping me? And Arsenal steps up, having been poisoned by Cheshire slightly. It's like, because we're buddies. We're friends. Anyway, I'm going to leave. Don't die. Bye. So Jason hears a voice in his head saying, hey, Jason, this is going exactly according to my plan. Just breathe deep and picture the all blades, and 2 swords pop up in his hands. And he's like, who is that? Who's talking to me? And the voice is like, you can do it, Jason. Your training has led you to here. Restore the balance of good and evil. And he keeps talking to the voice, and Bron Tiger's like, fearless leader, why did 2 magical swords just pop up in your hand as you're talking to a voice that isn't talking to you? And he's like, I don't know, but I think it's going to help us in the fight. Anyway, the Untitled Attack. Here we go. Let's save the world assassin style. That's the issue. I appreciate that Arsenal is still 200% stuck in the 90s. He looks hilarious. I don't know if that's the intent, but he looks hilarious. And all the little gadgets and gizmos and stuff, he just feels 100% 90s. Beyond that, it's a fine issue. I think that obviously we were building to this point that, yes, there was going to always be a standoff between the League of Assassins and the Untitled. The fact that Arsenal just barely managed to scrape by, I think that makes sense. I don't feel like he got, like, put over or was thrown under the bus either. I think this is pretty much level with what I expect his powers to be at. He has some clever solutions, but in the end, he's just about getting the upper hand like a little bit. He's not a master tactician. So beyond that, it's a fine issue. I don't care much about the all cast and the all blades and the all whatevers. They're old stuff that I think probably should not have been reused, but if we got to tie it all together, Tynion's doing his best. So I'm going to say this is a 6.5. It's not bad. It's just not quite at that, yeah, I feel good about this level. It's just kind of a, yeah, it's there. Superman Unchained #3, written by Scott Snyder, art by Jim Lee, with the epilogues art by Dustin Nguyen. So, last issue, we had Superman meet up with this big old dude who basically stopped an attack on him, and then Lois Lane's plane started falling out of the sky, and Lex Luthor, I don't even know what's going on with Lex Luthor, I'll be honest, because there's this whole thing of him escaping from jail, and it seems like the way the story ended, and I had to reread this because this issue got me so confused, is that he made a recording that is piloting a mech of his own body because it's otherwise knocked out. And the recording is just so damn smart, and he plans so far ahead that it's just able to do these things. I think that's what's happening. But regardless, we get into the story. Utah desert, 1938. World War II's on the horizon. The U.S. government's like, we sent a signal out into space asking for help. And then 11 seconds later, a spaceship showed up. So we get a recap of everything, the Lois plot, the Lex plot, and we end up on the Superman plot, where the big dude who like got in the way of Superman's thing, he's like, hey, everyone, hold your fire. Superman's down. And Superman's like, who the heck are you? And he starts to explain who he is. But then General Lane steps up and is like, don't tell him. He's the enemy. What are you doing? And Superman's like, General Lane, tell me what's going on here. You owe me that much. And Lane's like, I don't know, you crap. Ready the sonic weapon. And Superman breaks it. And he's like, ready the other sonic weapon. And Superman goes to break that one too. But then this big guy gets in the way. And he's like, Superman, I need you to stand down. And he's like, okay. he just grabbed my fist out of midair. This guy's clearly strong. Let's see if he's like fast. And he like tries to super speed another punch, and the guy blocks that punch as well. He's like, seriously, stop testing me. These people, they just want to see you stand down. I don't want to like hurt you. This is like, just do it. And Superman, well, the guy ends up proving his strength by kicking Superman clear across all of Utah, which is an impressive sight. And as he lands, the other guy shows up and he's like, hey, look, we can stop fighting now. Like, those guys are far, far away. I gave the general what he wanted. Like, I know you have questions about me. And Superman's like, what the hell is going on? And he's like, fair enough. You want to come to my house? You want to just check that out? And he's like, okay. So then we go to Lois. Her plane is falling out of the sky. She takes over the pilot seat from the actual pilots. Because if you remember, there's this whole like terrorist group called Ascension that's anti-technology or some crap. I don't know. But regardless, Lois is like, hey, we need to aim for the power lines because otherwise we're going to crash in the ocean. And they're like, why would we aim for the power lines? And it's like, well, if we land out in the ocean with all of our electronics gone, nobody's even going to know we're out there and we're going to definitely die. But if we hit the power lines, then they're going to send a rescue crew and there's a chance that we might get noticed. So let's do that. So she hits the power lines, she crashes into the ocean, and we pause for a moment as we cut back to the backstory of what happened after that ship showed up in 1938, where apparently the thing that was sent out into space was an equation, but it was purposely wrong. It was like 1 + 1 = 3. So it was trying to get across the point of, hey, let's join together and become larger than the sum of our parts. And the ship that landed had its own mathematical formula, which was a hell of a lot more complex. And when it opened up, inside was this dude. And I cannot express to you that this dude is just a giant gray, like dark side looking guy with what appears to be like a falcon on his chest, but it's all like energy. So anyway, the person explaining this whole story is General Lane, and he says, and now you're in this place underneath the salt flats, 800 feet underground. This is called the Machine. And Superman's like, how in the hell did you manage to keep this from me? And he's like, well, we were doing a very good job at that until this idiot showed it. And the big gray guy, who in like 3 panels time, he reveals his name is Wraith, which we'll get to. Wraith is like, well, Superman would have found out eventually. It's better we do it on our terms. Anyway, I want you to consider me a friend, Superman, because I have fought alongside you, even if you didn't know about it. And Superman's like, okay, well, explain to me who this guy is. And Wraith explains, my name is Wraith. It's an acronym, an initialism. It stands for William Rudolph's Ace in the Hole. And that's because 75 years ago, when he first landed, General Rudolph was the one who basically turned him into a soldier for America. And so he was allowed to live here in this secret underground base called the Machine. And they were saying, yeah, no, this thing has been used ever since then. We've been using it. We're basically completely clandestine. The president gives us info, but then we just run with it and we're allowed to make our own decisions. Turns out there was only one atomic bomb, and Wraith here was the one that convinced Japan that we had 2. So that's a thing, and a whole bunch of other stuff that comes up. And Superman's like, so you're fighting your own private wars without the people knowing about it. And General Lane points to a map, and he's like, here's all the danger spots in 1938. And it's just overload with red. And he's like, and here's it today. And it's super small. And he's like, this is what we do. We've made the world safer. We actually shut this place down and had to turn it back on like 6-7 years ago because all you stupid superheroes started showing up and making the world more dangerous again. And Superman's like, well, it may be for the greater good, but the public, and generally just goes off. He's like, the public, of course, the public. Superman, let me tell you exactly what your problem is. You could be out there toppling dictators and saving lives, but instead you let those people die because the only thing you actually care about in the end is the public noticing all your great deeds. That's why you save cats from trees and you make sure that airplanes don't crash. It's because those things will let people clap for you. You don't actually make the hard choices to take down dictators and go in and save lives through proactive means like that. Superman's like, well, I don't have to take this. So at that point, there's a whole bunch of hubbub around the machine, and turns out that Ascension has launched an attack on Tokyo with a fleet of like attack drones that they've taken over, and Superman's like, well, that sounds like a job for me, and I guess Wraith here. You coming? And Wraith's like, yeah, I'm in, let's go. So they both fly out. We see Lex Luthor climbing his way out of his like a waterfall with his machine thing, and it just says, that's it, old shell, move up to, we've got a special visit to pay someone and we don't want to be late. I can't tell if this is still Lex. Like it's confusing to me. So anyway, back to Lois. She's her airplane is drowning in the ocean. She's trying to break open the glass on the windows. It's no use. It looks like she's going to drown, and then all of a sudden, her airplane starts back up again and pops up out of the water. And Lois is like, it's a miracle. That shouldn't have happened at all. What's going on? And as she looks outside, she sees the blinded guy with the crystal from last issue is using his crystal to save her. So anyway, we arrive in Tokyo. Wraith and Superman both see the carnage, the destruction happening. They move down, and Wraith is like, Superman, I've really been looking forward to working with you. It's really a shame that I'm going to have to kill you soon. And Superman's like, I'm sorry, what? That's the end of the issue. But then we get the epilogue. Jimmy Olsen's trying to get some Chinese food after they closed, and as he's looking in his fridge, he sees a shadow on the wall. He thinks it's Superman. Turns out it's Lex Luthor, and Lex is like, hey, Jimmy, you've been Superman's pal for a while. Now you're going to be my pal. So that's that. I like the idea. I like it because obviously this book was made for the purpose of the 75th anniversary of Superman. So having it be like, okay, if Superman didn't exist back in 1938, which in this continuity he did not, how can we have that? Like, what can we do? And so they basically made another Superman, and they're going to have this battle between the two. So I'm interested. I think it's an interesting enough plot, especially because Wraith seems a bit more complicated than I think I gave him credit for when I first saw him last issue, or even in the first issue when he made his little cameo. I think that it's interesting that he is so much of idolizing Superman, or maybe not idolizing is the wrong word, admiring him, but he still, no matter what, puts his country of America, even though he's an alien, he still puts America over top. It kind of shows the evolution of where Superman used to stand for truth, justice, in the American way, and now he stands for truth, justice, and whatever third thing the writers want to fill in. So, I don't know. I'm interested in the way this is going to go. We'll see. It's 9 issues in total, so we're a third of the way done. First act is wrapping up now. I'm interested, at the very least. So I'll give this one... I'll give it a solid 8. I really did. I enjoyed the writing and I enjoyed the art. So when it comes down to this issue, I really don't have that much to complain about. It's all about how we're going to pay it off in the future. Supergirl number 23, written by Michael Allen Nelson, art by Diogenes Neves and Chad Hardin. So last issue, Supergirl discovered that, wait a minute, Cyborg Superman might actually be evil. And he spawned a bunch of machines based off her memories of all of the people she met on Earth to chase her down. So this issue picks up exactly there. Wonder Woman is the first and foremost saying, like, you're a stupid little girl running away. You're dumb. You need to face us like adults. And she's like, I'm not a child. Shut up. So she keeps on flying away. We see Cyborg Superman is pushing Delacour to, like, hey, look, just attack her, beat her to a pulp if you have to, but I need her alive. And Delacour's like, yeah, that's cool, but you cut off contact with your creator, that's going to bite us in the ass. And he's like, I don't care. I just need Supergirl to get my memories back. So first we have the memory of Wonder Woman, like, use her lasso from her mouth to take out Supergirl's bike that she's using, because remember, she's still poisoned by kryptonite, I guess. She bumps into Superman. Superman's like, oh, if you just listen to me, you wouldn't be in this mess, Kara. And she's like, you don't even remember Krypton. You don't deserve to wear this crest. And she just punches a hole in him. Wonder Woman attacks her next, saying, like, oh, my planet was destroyed. People like Superman, but not me. You're a whiny little baby. And she's like, no, I'm an adult. And so she attacks Wonder Woman. Especially when Wonder Woman says, your mother should have raised you better, because Supergirl did not like that. Then we have Shaban, aka Silver Banshee's like, you left me on Earth to deal with this demon myself. I thought we were friends. And she's like, I have my own problem, Shaban. Get over yourself. And she uses her heat vision to just burn her to a crisp. Then we see, oh, what was her name? Rain, the world killer, who's like, see how destructive you are? You are a world killer. You're guaranteed to destroy the universe with us. And he's like, no, I'm not a world killer. You're all just bad memories that I'm getting rid of. This is therapeutic, actually. So she gets pushed around a little bit by everybody. And after she gets smacked by, I forget, it's a big purple guy. I think this was one of like Lex Luthor's drones that he sent in when Power Girl was around. Anyway, at that point, I think his name is Connor Kent. Is it? It's the clone, Superboy. Superboy shows up and he's like, oh, you're just jealous of people like me better than you. And he's like, nobody likes you better than me. What the hell are you talking about? And he's like, well, at least I have a place that I can belong, unlike you. Meanwhile, if you read Superboy, that's just blatantly untrue. But regardless, her response is, shut up, shut up, shut up, as she punches Superboy so hard, he simultaneously shatters the Lex Luthor drone thing. And then Tycho shows up and he like latches on. He's like, hey, Supergirl. And she's like, Tycho, what the? I completely forgot about you. And he's like, yeah, I know. We had to dive really deep into your subconscious to find me. Yeah, I was in Sanctuary and you exploded it. So I'm definitely dead now. And she's like, well, you get what you deserve, I guess. So Tycho's dead again. And finally, we see Hell. And Hell is standing there. He's got kryptonite lodged in his chest. And he's like, Supergirl, you loved me. Why did you kill me? This is all your fault. We could have had it all. And she's like, no, Hell. Oh, God, I can't deal with this. And so she flies away. And the kryptonite poisoning starts really taking its toll on her. Cyborg Superman shows up. And he's like, Supergirl, I'm giving you an option here. I can cure you, but you need to go along with what I'm saying here. And she's just like, no, I'll never do it. You'll give up. You're asking me to give up my body to you. Like, that's not going to happen. And he's just like, all right, fair enough. So he puts her into a electric cage or something like this. And as he does so, Supergirl swears that she will like haunt him for the rest of his life if he does this. And she's just like, all right, I don't care. Anyway, Delacour, we cool? And Delacour's like, yeah, no, we're cool. So he beats up Supergirl a little bit more until finally she's knocked out and she's brought to the surgery room. And at that point, he's talking to Delacour. Delacour's like, yeah, no, we're all cool, but I really want to bring up again how you shut off the phone to your creator, and that's not good for our planet if he shows up. And he's like, psh, whatever. You owe your entire planet to me because I protected you from the creator. I allowed you to keep on living. So do what I say. So they get Supergirl after she comes to, puts her in some red energy rings, and it's like, hey, this technology is going to purge your body of your kryptonite poisoning, but also simultaneously, like, kill you. So, yeah. So at that point, she starts getting essentially disintegrated. We see her suit lying in a pile of dust. She gone. And so Cyborg Superman lays down on the table. Delacour's like, hey, I got the kryptonite poisoning isolated. Do you want to study that? And he's like, dude, there's like 100 better things you could be doing right now. Like, I don't know, starting the procedure on me. I want my memories back, goddammit. So as he's starting up the procedure, Delacour's like, sir, something is flying at the planet. It is very big and we can't identify it. I think it's your creator. And he's like, I don't care. Do this quickly. Let's go. And so he starts the process. He screams out in pain as he starts getting all of his memory back. And we see his creator, which is now attacking Delacour, is, of course, Brainiac. Like, we knew that last issue. The speech bubbles were too apparent. But regardless, Brainiac is now attacking the planet. Delacour looks over at Cyborg Superman, who has shedded all of his cyborg parts because he's used Supergirl's essence or whatever. And he's like, oh, do you remember who you are? Do you have your memories back? And Cyborg Superman sits up out of the shadows and reveals, yes, my name is Zor-El. I am Kara's father. Dear Lord, what have I done? So, technically the next issue is 24, but there is going to be Action Comics 23.1 next month, which is Cyborg Superman and how did he get here. So we'll deal with that. But as for this issue, I don't know. I don't inherently have a problem with the concept, but I'm very tired of let's use the memories of a hero against them. And it's like this whole big thing of them having to face it down. And it's, in one sense, it's providing deeper characterization. It's saying, here's what their fears are regarding these characters. But in the other sense, it's like, if you've been reading the book, you know all this. It's a thing where, like, they bring up Rain, and they bring up Silver Banshee, and they bring up all this stuff. And you're like, these have all been established. This feels more like if somebody is onboarding to the character at this point, where you can go back and say, oh, look at all these wonderful characters that we've shown the fears of our main character through. And it's like, I know them. I've seen them. And this is like the fourth book that just came out this week that has done this. I'm tired of it. And it's not this book's fault, but it does feel like the most played out version, in that these are the way that she remembers all of these people around. But it's like, not, because Superman didn't act like this. It's her own fears of how Superman was acting. Same with Wonder Woman, same with all of them. It's just, I don't know. I'm tired of it, I guess, is my long and short of it. So overall, though, not a horrible issue. I think they could have done a better job explaining exactly what the consequences of Cyborg Superman's plans were. He said last issue, it's like, oh, I'm going to use your body. But here he looks like a 40-year-old man after he comes out of it. So I guess I'm confused as to what you mean by use your body. In general, I'll give this one, I'll give it a 6.5. I really want to give it the 7, but after everything I said, I just can't justify it. So yeah, 6.5, unfortunately. But that's not to say it's a bad issue. It's just came out at the wrong time for me and did the wrong things. Green Lantern New Guardians number 23, written by Justin Jordan, art by Brad Walker. So last issue, we had Relic basically coming out. He captured Kyle for a brief period, and then he just took off. And Kyle's like, oh, he's going after ring people. We got to deal with that. So this issue picks up on Elpis, which after the events of like Green Lantern New Guardians, like 17 or something, it's been a while. They got a new planet. The Blue Lanterns have established themselves on this new planet. And all of a sudden, as they're meditating, St. Walker's like, oh, hey, something's happening. And they turn around and look at the Blue Lantern battery. And all of a sudden, it's totem entity, I forget what they exactly call it, I think it's entity, busts out of it. Its name is Adara, and it just flies away. It just screeches into the sky and flies away. And St. Walker's like, well, that can't be good. What happens if an entity gets sick? Does that mean that we don't have any more hope? What's going on here? And just like, whatever, we don't need to worry about that. And they're like, why not? It's like, well, we got bigger problems. Because all of a sudden, Relic's ship just shows up out of a wormhole right over top their planet and starts poking and prodding with his machines at the central power battery. St. Walker's like, okay, everyone stay calm. I'm going to go talk to this guy. I'm sure he just needs to charge his phone or something. So he flies up and he says, hey, hi, you are not my enemy. I do not know you, but I need you to stop. And Relic is like, do you know what I'm doing, or do you just like hope you know what I'm doing? And he's like, I don't know who you are, but I'm also not an idiot. And he's like, that's funny. You know, you're not attacking me. He's like, yes, and I don't want to. And he's like, no, you can't attack me. I know about the blue light. I know what you're able to do. And so he starts like flashing his lights as a show. And he's like, I know you don't have offensive. Seriously, that's not a big thing. But we do show that St. Walker does have at least some amount of offensive ability, but that's primarily because Kyle Rayner, Carol, and all the new Guardians show up right then. So they show up, and Kyle's like, hey, I was trying to call about this, but for some reason he's blocking the ability. So we just had to jump into the wormhole after him. And they all come up with a plan of like, what are we supposed to do? What are we doing? Kyle immediately jumps in. He's like, Relic, I'm not going to let you hurt these people. They haven't hurt anybody. They are literally the most peaceful people. And he's like, oh, I wish that were true. But every time they use their light, they're dooming the universe. I'm not letting this universe end. And we see Worth, the big elephant Blue Lantern. He's like, hey, every time we try to attack his machines, they just absorb our energy. We need a more direct attack. So he comes in and just punches the crap out of the machines. And Sam Walker's like, oh, right, you're a tank. I kind of forgot about that. So at that point, Relic's like, you guys, do you honestly think that you can harm me with your light weapons? Like, I've already shown you that doesn't work. And he's like, no, we don't think we can harm you, but they probably can, as all the Guardians come around Relic and start blasting them with their mental energy. And we see that Relic actually pulls them into some sort of mental plane, like all separated. They're each in their own. And he's talking to the Guardians, each individually, but also collectively. And he's like, hey, look, here's the thing. I might have jumped the gun. I didn't think you'd be able to understand. But you guys, you seem to have an enhanced mental ability. I'm going to show you everything and make you understand. And so he shows them everything about his past, just super pumps it into their head. And they collapse to the ground like, no, that can't be. And he lets them all go. And they all start collapsing to the ground. Kyle, St. Walker, and the other Blue Lanterns save them from falling as Carol jumps in on the offensive, but as she attacks with the light of love, it does nothing. He literally is not affected to it. And Kyle's like, what? Can he even feel love? And she's like, no, that's the problem. He's doing all of this out of love. He loves everything that much. And Kyle's like, okay, well, that's stupid. I'm going to use Yellow Lantern power. So he busts out fear just to make his fears come to life. We see all these horrific looking monster things. And Relic's like, you think I'm supposed to be afraid when I've had all of my fears actually realized? My universe died, man. You got nothing on me. And he just smashes the constructs. So everyone's trying to bat away the machines that are draining the central power battery, which Kyle points out shouldn't be possible, that the power battery should always stay charged. And so they try attacking Relic some more. He's just like, okay, I'm just going to redirect your stuff while I do my thing. Like, I don't really want to care about you guys anymore. But one of the blasts gets redirected to St. Walker when he's not expecting it. And he gets knocked out of the sky pretty hard. So at that point, Kyle goes down and he's like, okay, this is getting a bit too serious now. We got to deal with this. The central power battery is now like completely empty. All of the robots are returning back to the ship. And Relic starts firing down a laser beam at all of our heroes. Blue Lanterns try to keep a little shield up just to protect everybody as Kyle looks over St. Walker. He's trying to heal him, but for some reason it's not working. And they point out that it's because he has taken all of the hope from the central power battery. Like, there's nothing more that can be done to heal. And one of the Guardians, like Ganthet, he's like, hey, look, he showed us what's going on. I'm going to show you too. And so he smacks the memories into Kyle, and he's like, oh God, oh no, I get it now. So at that point, Worth is like, hey, here's the thing. You got to transport out of here. Use your indigo energy and just get out of here. And he's like, oh, I can't. So much energy has been drained. I can't make the leap, especially with this many people. And Worth is like, you can and you will. Have hope. And Kyle points out, like, well, I'm not going to leave you guys here. And he's like, there's a lot of things about Blue Lantern energy that you don't understand that we haven't like fully revealed yet. St. Walker knows that better than anyone. You need to save him. You need to get him out of here because the Blue Lantern Corps will be okay as long as he's okay. So teleport out of here. And here's our little special surprise. And it turns out that the blue energy power is not only able to bump green energy power, but it's also able to bump at least indigo, possibly other cores as well. And Kyle's like, how long has that been a thing? And he's like, I'm not going to bother telling you, bye. So Kyle teleports out with all the Guardians, Carol, and St. Walker. All of the other Blue Lanterns lose their power. Their rings go completely dry. They have no more power left to draw on. So as Relic looks down, he's like, do you believe your sacrifice will change anything? And Worth just sits down with his friends and starts meditating. He's like, oh, I hope so. But all I know is that all will be well. And Relic's like, okay, and just destroys them with a laser. Like, we see their skeletons as the planet is hit. I feel really bad for the Blue Lantern Corps. This is now the second time just in this book that they have lost their planet, essentially. This is bad news. I do appreciate this is the first time that it feels like Relic has cemented himself as a villain, and the way that all the other heroes, having looked into his mind, describe like, oh no, without actually saying what happened. They just say, oh no. That does more than I think even him killing the Blue Lantern Corps does. Of just this idea of, we have all the villains or all the heroes saying there is no chance of us winning, but the audience isn't quite let in yet. It really adds that mystique of like, no, we're screwed. Add on top of it that he literally destroys hope. I think that speaks for itself. So overall, I like this issue. I think it's fantastically well done. I know that with all of the issue 24s across the Green Lantern books is the event Lights Out, which I believe deals with specifically the ramifications of this. So we will get to that in 2 months' time. But this is solid. So I'm going to say that this one is, I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think this is a really well done book, and it ends on just the most darkest hour, especially for the Blue Lantern Corps. So yeah, 8.5. Justice League of America's Vibe number 7, written by Sterling Gates, art by Andre Guinaldo. Last issue, all of the monsters broke out of their cells, or I say monsters, creatures, characters, whatever you want to call them, and we were introduced to a new one, whatever his name is, we'll get to it, but turns out that it's actually Cisco's long-lost brother, Armando. So this issue picks up 5 years ago, as the wake or the viewing for Armando is happening. Cisco is out crying in the rain, and Dante comes up and says like, hey, we got to go to the viewing, come on. And he's like, oh, he's not even there, it's just a picture of Armando. And it's like, oh, just remember, Armando loved you, he always will. And of course, now at this point, his name is Rupture, and he's floating above Cisco, and Cisco's like, are you seriously my brother? And he's like, what? Huh? I kind of recognize. Okay, nope, never mind. No, I'm Rupture. I work for Mordeth, and I am a servant of the darkness, and I'm here to kill Gypsy. So at that point, Gypsy starts running. Rupture puts back on his mask, and Cisco's like, geez, I didn't expect this today. So him and Rupture get into a beam struggle. They start attacking each other. As they attack each other, Rupture is like, I'm not actually here for you. You're in my way, but I'm just going to go after Gypsy now that I knocked you back. So, bye. And he flies off. Meanwhile, as their energies hit each other, it apparently is enough to weaken the dimensional barriers, blah, blah, blah. Point being, a giant dragon comes through, and Vibe now has to fight against it. So, we cut to Dante, who apparently survived, and he's being carried out by Agent Gunn. And Gunn's like, yeah, I injected you with like a thing that's going to keep you alive. We can use it in the battlefield. Here's the deal. The entire area has been locked down. This is a code Omni. Everyone's freaking out because our entire systems are down. I am going to get you out of here because that's a promise I made. And then all of a sudden this giant like faux parademon busts through the wall. Agent Gunn shoots in the head a few times and takes it out. And he's like, remember that armor I snuck you in? I'm going to put you back in it. And that's somehow, it's going to go into like stealth mode. It's going to break out. Doesn't matter. Point being is you'll be fine. And Dante's like, wait, hold on. I feel like I saw my brother earlier. And Gunn's like, can't hear you. Bye. So he runs off, continues to fight some monsters down the hall. We see Rupture is stalking Gypsy, and he's like, oh yes, I've scanned countless worlds. Of course you'd be on this one that I can't reach because of the block or whatever. But now I'm able to get in because the walls have weakened. And Gypsy tries going invisible. Of course he can see her. So she's just like, oh, stay back. And he's like, you honestly, she's got like a gun. And he's like, you honestly think a gun's like, I am Rupture. What are you thinking, you stupid girl? And at that point, Vibe shows up and he's just like, she was just trying to distract you. And so Rupture goes through a few walls. Cisco tries to get more answers. He's like, Armando, bro, where'd you go? Why didn't you come back home? And he's like, I don't answer questions to puny people like you. And Cisco just keeps on pushing him, trying to get an answer. We see Gunn is attacked by a giant snake monster and is about to die, or at least be eaten. And then Amanda Waller shows up with a minigun. And She's like, oh, thank you, Walt. And she's like, don't thank me. This is all your fault. We are seriously going to have a discussion about you because this is years of efforts gone. And it turns out their main focus right now, that all their systems are failing, is to protect the Omega Room, which is where the daughter of Darkseid is, because they cannot absolutely let her get out. So we see Rupture is attacking them, and based off of some things that Rupture said of like, oh, and you've been running ever since or whatever, Vibe put together that Gypsy wasn't telling the total truth about her story. So he manages to get her aside and says like, look, if I'm going to protect you and everyone else here, I need to know the full truth right now. So she explains, many years ago, Rupture fell from the skies. He had some power, but everyone thought he was like a god because he just descended from the heavens. A queen named Mordeth cared for him, and on the condition that he serve her, she brainwashed him, turned him into this being of death, and used him to hunt down her and her people. And it turns out her father is actually dead, and Rupture is the one who killed him with his own two hands. So at that point, Cisco's like, okay, thank you for the story. Armando, I know you're still in there. I saw you break through your programming. Please, I know you're in there. And Rupture's like, Cisco? You have powers like me? And he's like, yes, I do. I can do the same things you can. He's like, cool, I need a recharge. So he zaps Cisco with his super scythe or something like that, which allows him to start absorbing the energy of Cisco to bend the walls of reality. He grabs Gypsy and they start warping out of there. And as the warp happens, some sort of wave envelops everybody, but I can't tell what happens. It looks like it's just electronics go down, so I don't know. At that point, Gunn and Waller are making their way towards the Omega Room. Bad news, though, because the systems are down. Darkseid's daughter manages to escape as we see a huge hole in the ceiling. So Gunn's like, well, what's the problem? We caught her once, we'll catch her again. And Waller's like, you idiot, it's not that. You think she's going to fall for the same tricks again? You stupid idiot. I want to find that stupid kid that you hired, and I'm going to strangle him. Where is Vibe anyway? And we see the gaping hole that was left from Rupture and Gypsy teleporting out. And it turns out Cisco's going along for the ride because he's still hooked by the chest to his sickle. So, yeah, that's the book. I like it. I think it is a solid little bit here because I gotta say I appreciate the fact that it's not as easy to break the brainwashing as just Armando, it's me, your brother. Like, no, it's brainwashing. The whole point of that is that like he doesn't care about that anymore. Even if he does remember, he doesn't care. So I'm down with that. As for the other story of like why Gypsy was lying or something, I think she used the excuse of like, oh, I couldn't risk putting people in danger or something like that. Like, it's a stupid excuse, which I think it doesn't need to be done that way, but it doesn't hurt anything the way they did it either. So net zero on that. Beyond that, I don't know. It just kind of feels like a really fast-paced issue because the fight is still just going on, and it doesn't feel like any side made any major gains except for Rupture teleporting them out in the very like last page. So most of the issue is kind of like, yeah, we're just kind of dealing with the fallout of Armando still alive, but barely. So I'm gonna say this is like a flat 7. It's fine. It's good. I didn't hate reading it, but I also didn't like jump for joy. It's just an average book. It's perfectly competent in everything it does. So yeah, 7. Wonder Woman number 23, written by Brian Azzarello, art by Cliff Chiang. So last issue, we had them dealing with all the New God stuff, and then Wonder Woman and Co. started attacking the Firstborn. So this issue picks up, Firstborn sends in his hyena soldiers. I gotta admit, I don't know where these guys really came from, but regardless, Wonder Woman starts swinging her lasso, and it's a rope. What are you gonna do with a rope? She grabs a boulder and just swings it around and takes out a whole bunch of them. But of course, Firstborn like, yeah, all right, sure, whatever, I got plenty of them. So huge horde of them come in. War just leaves the middle of the battlefield and walks over to the wall of the chapel they're in. And he's just like, where are you going? And War is like, so some say that when you're faced with insurmountable odds, you have to retreat. And he pushes down the wall of the cathedral and he says, you better listen to them advice, Firstborn. So Firstborn's like, what, you got soldiers? You got someone to fight against my Haney guys? And War says, yeah, I have all the soldiers as best I can describe them, ghost army of every soldier to ever live comes into the cathedral. And Wonder Woman's like, I'm sorry, what in the hell is this? And he's like, I'm the god of war. I'm able to call on soldiers and such. It's just a thing I can do. Don't ask too many questions. So we see throughout all this, Orion's also in there. He's throwing down, trying to fight as well. Hera's like, this is crazy. I got to get you out of here, Zora. And Zola's like, wait, no, I got to get you out of here. I'm protecting you. You're just a normal person. She's like, no, I'm protecting you. And they go back and forth a little bit, but eventually Zola's like, no. It's okay. We just got to stay out of the center of the fight. We can be in the building. I know because Zeke isn't going to let anything bad happen to us. I can just feel it. And Hera's like, okay, sure, whatever. So Firstborn stands up. He's all pissed off that his hyena army is starting to get taken on. Orion comes in from the top belt, full-on body slams Firstborn, and they get into just a good old fist fight. And Firstborn, of course, gets the upper hand. He's like, all right, I am going to take care of you properly, but for right now, I just need you out of my way. And so he throws him into a pillar of the cathedral, which collapses. He throws down one of the bricks on top of him, and he's like, Wonder Woman, you're next. And Wonder Woman stands there. She starts taking off her gauntlets, her shackles, and she's like, oh, I am so going to get revenge for my half-brother that you killed. And he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. So as she takes off the thing, War steps up behind her and is just like, just want you to remember, when it comes to brute force against brute force, you once asked me, is any fight worth winning if it costs this oneself? And Wonder Woman's like, you never gave me a good answer, so I think I'm going to roll with that. So she charges in with the powers of Zeus. She blasts him up into the sky, starts punching him repeatedly, just saying, like, you are a monster. I will not hesitate to destroy you if I have to. And he's just like, oh, you just did. You looked at me and you saw what you're capable of, what we're both capable of. That's how far you've fallen. And so he seismic tosses her back down to the ground, and she's out for at least a brief period. Firstborn stands up and is like, cool, 2 down, who next? Who else here is of a god? And he looks at baby Zeke and he's like, well, you're next. So he walks over, Hera jumps in the way, he grabs her by the throat and says, mother, how dare you, you bitch. And then War pulls out a shotgun, shoots him in the head, says, that's no way to talk to your mother. And we get a fist-to-fist fight between Firstborn and War. And War holds his own really well. He's able to, like, flip Firstborn over. He does a great job. But Firstborn is still Firstborn. He grabs War by the neck. Wonder Woman starts coming to. She's like, okay, maybe I should have listened. I shouldn't have gone in with brute force. I needed more of a plan. And she looks over at War and Firstborn. War is getting his throat crushed by Firstborn, and she starts trying to move her way over to him. Firstborn's like, I've been going through this all wrong. I've been thinking that the child is the key to Olympus, but if I kill you, I'll become the new god of war, and then I could just kill Olympus from inside. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to crush your neck and kill you. And so he goes to do so. We see War vomits blood out of his mouth, but Firstborn shouts, no! And on the next page, we see that it turns out Wonder Woman has taken a spear and impaled War and Firstborn through the stomachs. Firstborn kind of tanks it, but War, not so lucky. War is there. He's like, hey, you took my advice. You did what needed to be done. Proud of you. And as he's laying there dying, he says, hey, Wonder Woman, you have to take on my eternal burden now. It's yours to do. I offer you whatever I can, but peace. And then he dies. And we see Firstborn, he tanked it, but he wasn't doing so well. Zola comes in with a big old beam of wood and just bashes him over the head when he's not looking. That's enough to at least knock him out. So War is dead. We see Hades steps up and he's like, hey, I came to pick up my nephew. I need to take him. Hera steps forward and says goodbye to War because she is his mother, and says, oh, I hope that you find in death the peace you could never have in life. And Wonder Woman asks Hades, like, hey, are you going to take Firstborn as well? And he's like, well, he's not dead. Unless you're going to finish the job, no. And she's like, no, there's been enough killing today. Hades is like, oh, that's different for a god of war, but okay. So they make their way out of the cathedral. We do see Apollo standing over the, I guess, still alive body of the Firstborn, smirking like he's got machinations. And finally, we see them walking out to the river and placing the body of War inside a boat that sails down the river. And at least the trade version says end, but I know that Brian Azzarello continues writing this book, so maybe it's just end of the arc. But okay, Wonder Woman is the new god of war. Thoughts? I thought this was a very well done issue. It did a fantastic job of finally giving War that characterization I've been looking for, because throughout this entire series he's been around and it seems like he's had these sort of plans or ideas, but it never really felt like we've got a good characterization of him. It never felt like we really buckled down. It just felt like he was old and weary. But this time he actually got involved in the fight. He brought in an entire army. He showed his true strength. He went fisticuffs with the Firstborn. I'm down with this. I think this was fantastically done. My only critique with this is that I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe this is the first time in this issue we're getting the concept of kill the god, take their place rules, which doesn't make sense to me, because if Zeus died, which is the premise for the whole book, shouldn't whoever killed him has taken his place as at least god of lightning? But like that didn't. So it's a little tiny nitpick. It like doesn't detract from this independent story at all, but just viewing it on the larger whole, it kind of opens it up to questions. Unless it only applies to war, which makes sense, of that, you die in battle and whoever kills you takes your place as god of war. That would make sense, but I don't know. The rules are just kind of nebulous right now. And that's my only little critique, and someone who likes those things mapped out very well for me. But yeah, art's great. Writing's great. There's actually in the back of this trade a breakdown of the like art before it's colored in and all that, with some temporary speech bubbles. I absolutely love it, because all of War's little monologues are just scribbles. Like they knew War was just going to talk about like all this philosophical stuff, but he didn't want to write it yet. Fantastic. It really adds to the issue. So yeah, no, I'm going to give this one, honestly, I think this particular issue is probably a 9. I think I'm going to give it a full 9. It's very close to an 8.5 because, again, I do have some criticisms, but it was just a very well-written issue. It set forward a lot of things and got them all wrapped up nicely in an emotional finish. I like all of that, so 9 it is. Legion of Superheroes number 23, written by Paul Levitz, art by Kevin McGuire. So, last issue, they defeated the Fatal Five, but everything still sucks. And now we are into the final issue of the series. So, this is just basically a reel of what are we doing? What are all the characters up to? So, we introduce Polar Boy and Invisible Guy, and they're both mourning the loss of Solar Kid. And it's this graveyard for Legionnaires, as far as I could tell. And so Dream Girl steps up and she's like, hey, this is, awful stuff. So sad. It's a custom on my world to, take the burial dirt and, bring it to your lips to see if there's a taste of this person's dreams. I don't know. Regardless, they say, yeah, okay. The Legion still continues on. They're trying to figure out why. First off, apparently Brainiac 5 is the one who gave Invisible Kid his powers. I don't remember that, but sure. And they don't understand fully how his powers work because they were able to go to the realm of the dead and come back. So there's still something to investigate there. So they fly off of the graveyard planet that they're on and go back to Earth, I presume. And as we get there, we see Colossal Boy, who I guess was just busy with other things, and Ultra Boy, it's Boy, right? Ultra Boy are cleaning up everything on Earth, and they are at the place where Legion headquarters was. And just like, yeah, no, everything around the universe is crap right now. We were so reliant on tech. Like, we can't do anything anymore without it. So, like, how are we even supposed to do anything anymore? And they go down into the pit that is their headquarters. And they see there are other Legionnaires already down there, including Brainiac 5, who's currently working on workarounds, because it was just that one specific but very ubiquitous kind of tech that stopped working because of Tharok. So he's coming up with workarounds for all these different types of tech and sending it out across the universe. So he's telling people like, excuse me, can I get some peace and quiet, because I'm literally saving the universe right now. And everyone, they call him pompous or whatever, and they're just like, oh, he's such a jerk. And Duplicate Damsel or whatever steps up and is just like, hey, Brainiac, if you don't stop acting like a jerk, I'm going to tell everybody how I know that you're the one who opened up the original Brainiac's armory, and that's how Tharok got his powers. And he's like, you wouldn't dare. I have to save the universe. And she's like, yeah, you do. So stop being a prick. So at that point, Bouncing Boy comes in, and he's like, hey, guys, I found the trophy room. I found this cool thing in there. Brainiac 5 doesn't want to hear it, but he says, but it's Superman's shirt, the one speared, and then he gets cut off by Brainiac. So at that point, Brainiac says, like, oh, there's so much to do. Weber's world needs to be restored. Science police want us to find Validus to imprison him. We need our headquarters to be rebuilt. We have to find a way to undo what Tharok has done. And Phantom Girl has still abandoned the League, disappearing Elseworld. Like, we've got some plan to get the Legion back on track. And some of the Legionnaires pop in. They don't have name tags, so I'm not even going to bother. But it's the one who was in a relationship with Mon-El. And she comes in and she's like, hey, screw that. Like, the United Planets have collapsed. The killed and crippled Legionnaires. Brainiac 5 wants to take charge. Count me out. I'm going to take Mon-El back to his planet and see if we can get him healed. And Brainiac 5's like, I have like a 75% chance of having a better healing plan than they would. And he's like, I don't care. Well, I'm taking him and leaving him. So they start to walk away. Brainiac points to Harmonia, who is the leader, while Phantom Girl's gone. She enters with a member of the science police. And he's like, Harmonia, get them to come back. I can heal Mon-El. And he's just like, yeah, no, that's not a priority right now. Everybody listen up. And the woman from the science police basically says, okay, here's the thing. We don't want to reestablish the Legion. So from here on, the Legion has been disbanded. And everyone rightly freaks out saying, what? And it's like, yeah, you're all going civilian again. Go back to your homeworlds. Legion of Superheroes is done. And one of the kids named Jan, I don't know, he's got a weird symbol on his chest, says like, my homeworld was destroyed, where do I go? And he's like, oh, you're gonna work with the science police along with a couple other ones here, just like go home. So the Legion is over, as they say. And then we get 4 epilogues. First is Dream Girl, who is back on her home planet. She's like, I'm so upset that my lover, boyfriend, husband, whatever he was, died. He died without a hero's death. It's so much happening, it just feels like a bad dream. Then we go to Duplicate Damsel and Bouncing Boy, which basically they're standing in the middle of like this Legion shrine or something like that, and they're like holding hands, talking to each other. And I do want to point out something specifically here that Bouncing Boy says, and somewhere there are other universes where it's all probably happened very differently. Maybe even Steppenwolf didn't send Superman to his doom. And I'll get back to that. So then epilogue 3 is Karate Kid and What's-Her-Face are flying to a planet of Orondo. And she's like, yeah, this is my homeworld. I'm great to have you here. But like, everything that's happened, it's slowly just going to sink in every day. Like it's not something that's just going to get better. And then finally we have the planet of Winoth, where Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy, and Saturn Girl, that's it. That's all 3 of them. They're all chilling with some kids and such like that. And it's just like, yeah, well, that's, the Legion's done, but we were already retired for a while there, so, but we were the originals, and hey, I think Saturn Girl was the best leader we ever had. And it's like, nah, that was definitely Cosmic Boy. So they all just enjoy their little idyllic homeworld or whatever. And Saturn Girl looks up and she's like, well, if the Legion was finished, I'm not going to dwell on bad dreams or other universes or what the future may hold, because our story will never end. And the end. So going to what Bouncing Boy said, I feel like having the 1-2 punch of Saturn Girl saying worrying about other worlds, and then Bouncing Boy saying Superman was done in by Steppenwolf. Before that he mentions being speared by something. I feel like what this book is trying to do in this final issue is say that this is the future of another Earth. It's not Earth Zero, or at the very least, obviously, we're still in post or pre-Flashpoint timeline. But maybe it was still a different... I don't know. It's just the way they threw that in there, and they made sure to really dwell on it, makes me think that they were implying, look, we know we can't say what the future of the Earth Zero world is because it is post-Flashpoint now. So they're kind of establishing that, no, this is actually a different thing entirely. Something that doesn't make it pre-Flashpoint, but still keeps it in continuity by making it a different Earth. That's what I picked up from it. It was just a weird way they worded it. Either way, it's the final issue of Legion. I have historically been very hard on this book. There have been 24 issues of this. I would say less than half of them I have been even positive on. But a lot of that comes down to most of these issues never felt like they had a story. They always felt like just this random-ass collection of characters doing random things that barely applied to each other. It didn't help that there were 70 characters that they were trying to fit in here. And it never quite got me. It was only once we got to the Fatal Five stuff in the very end where all of the characters were A, slimmed down to very specific groups, and B, focused on one particular plot. That's where it started working for me. Everything else is just kind of meh, if not worse. So for this particular issue, I think that it does really nothing in terms of providing a satisfying ending. It was just Legion's done, and then we see where are they nows. So I can't really rate it that highly. That being said, I didn't think it was awful either. I didn't think it was infuriating to read. It just kind of felt like a show that had gone on too long, and they just had to kind of wrap up a bunch of different plot lines very quickly. That's kind of what I got out of it. And it wasn't satisfying, but it was at least it ended. At least we were able to put the old girl down. So I'm going to say this one is this one's a 6. It's just fine. It's okay. It's not good. It's just okay the whole way through. And I'm sorry, Legion, that I never quite got into you, but frankly, you didn't make it easy. Animal Man number 23, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Steve Pugh and Francis Portela. So last issue, we had a whole thing of the splinter species were taking Buddy's blood and delivering it to Brother Blood, and also that Maxine wants to go on a quest to find Cliff's soul in the red. So that all's happening. We see that the paparazzi in this issue, as they busted into the room, I thought for sure they were going to be dead, but it turns out Buddy took the distraction to free himself from the table he was strapped down to. He attacks one of the splinter folk, whose name is Hogue, I believe, and he's like, "Tell me who you work for. What's going on here?" And the Hogue is like, "Oh, you don't even understand. You had this connection with the Red. Now we will be the Reapers of Mankind." And it immediately cuts to a TMZ-esque thing, and it's just wow, that was quite the thing that our paparazzi caught. But it is curious whether or not this is all just a stunt for his movie award thing that's coming up in just 2 days. Is this actually real, or is Buddy just making it up for publicity? And we see Buddy watching this on TV. He's like, Jesus Christ, these vultures. So he calls up Ellen on the phone. He sees a whole bunch of paparazzi just swarming his hotel. And he's like, hey, Ellen, gets her voicemail, I should say. Just like, I'm going through a hard time right now, and I know you don't really want to talk to me, but I need to talk to somebody because I am losing it right now, so please call me back. So at that point, we see Ellen, the same night as last issue, is cuddling up with Maxine. She's fallen asleep, and so Maxine sneaks out with Socks again back into the red, and they reach Shepard, who has... The red has adjusted itself to fall into her fantasies in that there is a pirate ship awaiting her with a giraffe as a captain and a parrot as the first mate. And his name is Captain Longneck. And the first mate is, I don't know, but I'll get to it. So basically, Maxine's fantasy is we're going to use this pirate ship to go into the red and search out for Cliff's soul. And it turns out there is a thing called the Rib Cave, which is where souls go to. It looks like a rib cage, and as you enter into it, you are reincarnated somewhere else in the red. And Maxine is like, reincarnated? That means he could come back as like a bug. I don't want him to come back as something else. I want him to come back as Cliff. And he's like, well, then we got to get going. So they do the whole hoist the sails. You heard her. Double time. Let's go, laddies. You can walk the plank and all that stuff. So we see Buddy. He wants some answers as to what's going on. He tries to just call up like people and saying, hey, I'm a superhero. Can I talk to the Splinter Species guy? And all of them are just like, if you're not Superman, no, we don't really care. So he has to break into Belle Reve, where Hogue is being held. And we see him using a bit of his powers to get in. He jumps over the fence using a grasshopper, but then he's like, okay, Hogue is held in a cell, which is pretty airtight, but it does have a ventilation system inside. But the vent is much too small for a normal human to fit in. So I use the powers of a boa constrictor and a snail to like condense my body downward. And we see him just like ooze out of this vent. And even Hogue is like, Jesus Christ, buddy, what are you doing? And at that point, Buddy gets up on him, just like, shut up, I'm asking the questions. Well, what is this about? Why is this me? And just like, dude, you have such a gift. You are integrated with the red so deeply. You are connected to all of life. And you dress up like an idiot and get into tabloids. Like, you squander it so much. We're going to use your power to its full effectiveness. You're out of time. Speaking of which, at the Church of Blood, Brother Blood is going through his whole monologue saying, yes, everyone, I have a connection to the red. I told them to choose me. I should have been their avatar, but no, it was Buddy Baker. Now I have decided to correct this error. I shall drink of his blood, and I will become the new avatar of the red. And I guess you all will be, like, rewarded in some way, I guess. Sure, whatever. Anyway, here we go. Bottoms up. So he drinks the blood. He starts coughing. He collapses down into the pool of blood he stands in. And then as he comes up, he has all those red markings that Buddy had back in issue 1. And he's like, oh, I see it. I see the red. Oh, I'm tripping balls. So back in the red, we see Maxine on the pirate ship. They see the rib cave, and they see all the souls migrating towards it. And Shepard's like, now, just remember, like, we could have been too late. He's been here for a while. He might have already reincarnated. And he's just like, that's not good enough. We got to go faster. So they make their way deep into the cave. Maxine looks down. She says she thinks he sees him. She points to a vaguely humanoid, like, figure wading through the blood. And then all of a sudden, there's this cold front. There's this huge storm that plows through the red, and everyone feels it. We see Brother Blood extending his power out into the red, like tendrils are extending from him. Buddy collapses in pain. We see all of the the Red Kingdom itself, where the totems are. The storm is centralized on them, and Brother Blood enters in and just starts firing off lightning bolts. Maxine is reaching out for Cliff, but Shepard's like, no, like, something huge has just happened. This needs to wait. We need you back at HQ. So they pull back. We see all of, like, the dog guardian things are being torn limb from limb by Brother Blood. And he even ends up killing a couple of the other ones. And he makes his way into the hall where all the totems are. And the totems are like, what the hell is this? Who the hell are you? I don't even know you. What's going on? He's just like, oh, you should have chosen me. I could have been your avatar, but now I'm forcing this, and I'm going to turn the red into the empire it deserves, over top of the green and the rot. You totems, you're cowering at true power. And they're just like, what? who the hell are you? And then all of a sudden, Brother Blood uses his ability to basically kill one of the totems. That's the point where Maxine feels it. She doubles over in pain. Shepard and Socks run over to her. Socks is also kind of feeling it. And Maxine just cries out from her mom in pain. We see that Ellen wakes up. Maxine is not in bed because obviously she's in the red. She's calling around, panicking, trying to find Maxine. And as Buddy is doubled over in the cell next to Hogue, Hogue's like, I mean, I'm not going to turn down this opportunity to kill you, so it's time. And we see back in the Hall of the Totems, they're like, how in the hell does this guy have so much power here? We're the ones who decide who have power here. How does he have so much power? And we see, like, the head totem, the one who's always been in front, sneaks up from behind the other ones, snaps their necks and kills them, and says, like, yeah, it was me. I did it. I want the red to be like, you guys have kept on giving the red to, like, kids and idiots. I'm going to give it to someone who's going to do something cool. So Brother Blood has been actually chosen by this single totem who has killed all the other totems, and now, I don't know, the red's screwed or something like that. It's solid. It's good. It's a nice little plot to it. I do like it's technically a 3-pronged plot, but it's actually more of a 2-pronged one, in that the Buddy plot and the Brother Blood plot are pretty much the same. Gotta say, like, I really want to see how this book is going to handle the movie awards thing, because with all of this big stuff going on, that feels so inconsequential. And if it keeps on playing it as something that, like, actually matters, I don't know if I'm going to like that. If it eventually makes the shift where Buddy's just like, screw that, I don't care. Like, I'm more into it, you know? But the way they're playing it up, it's this thing of, like, how does the public perception of a hero matter? And if they really run with that, where it's like, it's not about the perception, it's about, like, doing the right thing, I think they could go in an interesting way with it. But I feel like there's also going to be this not wanting to go that far, and having it so that Buddy, like, manages to still be good in the public eye at the same time. But then again, they killed his son. They took away his powers. They've always managed to catch me off guard in this book, so it can go either way. In regards to a score, I'm going to give this one a solid 8. I think it's very well written. It sets up a cool new concept of, we have this new avatar of the Red, where the other one was still alive, which I don't know has even really happened before. So we've got some new things to deal with, and I'm super interested to see where they go. But 8 for this one. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this August 21st, 2013. And real quick, before I get into anything else, I'm going to tell you the comics that come out next week. And that is mainly because it really impacts the things I want to talk about. So, next week we have copies of Batman the Dark Knight, Catwoman, Talon, Batman/Superman, Superman, Larfleeze, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, Flash, Justice League All-Star Western, Green Team, and Teen Titans. Worth noting in that is specifically Justice League, which is the final part of Trinity War. However, I did skip over one book because it's annoying that it's here. We also have the Batman Incorporated Special. Why is that annoying? Well, first off, that book ended. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, so the fact we're getting a special after the fact kind of just feels like a money grab. Secondarily, as I said at the beginning of the show, next week is my anniversary of the show. Not any relationships I have, because, well, I don't want to get into that. But regardless, it is the anniversary of the show, and I would have liked to have had time at the end of the show to say things and do things that an anniversary would say or do. But if I have to go through an entire 80-page special at the beginning of the show, I ain't going to have that kind of time. So my options are, I talk really fast and maybe I'll get it done, or option 2, I just go a really long time. I'm leaning towards B, but I also know that I barely hold your attention for the show that it is already. stretching this thing out to 2.5 hours, I don't know how many people are going to stick around for the anniversary bit anyway. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Odds are there isn't going to be that much of a spectacular blowout. I might just say a few words of like, hey guys, thanks. It really was important that you be here. Just imagine that like 7 times if you're not going to stay for the whole thing. But anyway, I've rambled enough. This show is already probably getting long, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it up. Hey you, yes you, listening at home. Do you have any thoughts on something stupid I said? Go ahead and hit me up. We got a Discord, we got a Reddit, we got a Patreon. All the links are in descriptions. We also technically have a Twitter/X, but like, just don't. It's embarrassing at this point. Additionally, on top of that Patreon thing, if you go over there, there's a bunch of extra stuff. I happen to be on a bunch of other shows in the Mild Fuzz Network if you want to hear my dulcet tones anymore. I promise I barely talk about comics on any of them, so feel free to check those out with bonus content on Patreon. Anyway, that'll do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in to next week's episode, or don't. I really don't care. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.